Hello, and thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Coin Stories podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brunell, and I'm talking to leading voices in Bitcoin and macroeconomics. Please take a moment to subscribe to my page and like this video so other people see it in their feeds and so that you get my alert notifications for new episodes. And just a quick note, this podcast does not provide financial advice. Before I share my next guest, I have these messages from my sponsors who make the Coin Story Show possible. First, this episode is powered by the Bitcoin Conference 2022. It's going to be held in Miami, April 6th through 9th, and it's going to be the biggest Bitcoin event in the world. All 4 days will be jam-packed with exclusive content, exciting announcements, and an incredible lineup of Bitcoin speakers, artists, and leaders. Day 1 is Industry Day for enterprising Bitcoiners who are looking to build a business or career within the ecosystem. Days 2 and 3 are General Conference Days featuring speakers like El Salvador President Nayib Bukele, who has promised a big surprise at the event, as well as CEOs like Michael Saylor, Elizabeth Stark, Jack Mallers, Adam Back, and hundreds more. The conference caps off on the 4th day with the world's first and largest Bitcoin music festival, Sound Money Fest, headlined by rapper and fellow Bitcoiner Logic. You're also going to hear from Steve Aoki, CL, Run the Jewels, deadmau5, and many more. Last year's conference sold out, and this year's is on pace to be 3 times larger, so make sure you grab your tickets before it's too late. Tickets are selling out fast, so make sure to get yours at b.tc/conference and use the code COINSTORIES for 10% off. This episode is also powered by OKCoin, my favorite place to dollar cost average without the crazy fees. OKCoin recently launched its Crypto for All initiative, and it's aimed at democratizing knowledge and access to Bitcoin. OKCoin is one of the fastest growing and most secure global cryptocurrency exchanges that serves all your needs for Bitcoin and is committed to investing in educational content, funding crypto developers and entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups, and helping more diverse talent work on crypto ecosystem projects and careers. OKCoin has actually contributed more than $1 million to Bitcoin core devs and counting, has one of the most active Lightning nodes, and recently launched Sats mode. You can head to go.okcoin.com/Natalie and use my referral link for $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up. I'm excited to share my next guest is JP Sears, who you might also know online as Awaken with JP. He is a popular comedian, YouTube personality, life coach, and as of recently, a Bitcoin freedom fighter. We talked all about his rise to online media fame, his commitment to awakening people's inner calling, and his passion for Bitcoin as a freedom technology that's now empowering a censorship-resistant social media. Here's JP. JP, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to talk to you, and congratulations on all of your recent endeavors, your book, and Bitcoin conference. You're going to be a speaker.
Heck yeah. Thank you, Natalie. I'm happy to be here with you and also very grateful for a lot of blessings swirling around in life.
All right. Well, I want to learn more about you. And I always start at the beginning with all of my guests. So I read you're from Toledo, Ohio, which is funny. I am from the Midwest and I knew of Toledo because I was a big Katie Holmes fan. And I think she's from there.
Yeah.
So what was it like?
Which part of the Midwest are you from?
I'm from outside Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing. What was it like growing up there? What were you like as a kid?
Yeah. So I was born in Toledo, but raised in Bowling Green, Ohio, which is like 20 minutes south of Toledo. The major difference is, Toledo is kind of like a small city, but Bowling Green is a small farm town. So I had a very rural upbringing, no neighbors for most of my childhood. So, which is really cool. It was just a great farm kind of community. And my upbringing, I was always into sports. Like that was my favorite thing. That's what gave me the most joy. And I was pretty decent athlete. So it made sports even more enjoyable. And another piece of my, what I was like as a child is I hated school. Like I used to think like, do I have a learning disability? Now I learned it's actually a great asset where even to this day, I have the ability to have an inability to learn about things that don't feel purposeful to me. It's just like I shut down, I disconnect, I can't do it. I used to think that was a problem because there was just nothing I wanted to learn about in school. But now I see it as a great thing. Like when there's something I want to learn about it, I become maybe too obsessive. But I remember in school, the type of kid I was, like I wanted to have fun. I wanted to entertain myself. The schoolwork certainly wasn't doing it, and the way the teachers were presenting it, I mean, God love them, but it wasn't entertaining. So I would do this kind of scenario where I'd walk the line of tension, where just kind of out of the blue surprise, like I'd say something in class, like the teacher's going and like there's like a quick like, ooh, and I can say this. And the goal was to get a laugh, but not just make the students laugh, because then you get in trouble. The goal was I had to push it far enough where I can make the teacher laugh as well, because if I get the teacher to laugh, I'm not going to get in trouble. Like they're not mad. They're actually happy. Even if it was an involuntary thing, they laughed before they had a chance to filter. Well, I'm not supposed to laugh. He's not supposed to talk. Yeah. I should be mad. So I spent a lot of time in school. I didn't realize at the time, but I guess I was practicing comedy without knowing it, just to try to preserve my own mental sanity. I mean, to this day, like spending 8 hours doing something I don't want to do, it's not part of my life, let alone day after day after day. So I think it was a way, like I was able to come out of childhood somehow with my mind intact.
That's so funny. Well, I'm not surprised, because I read that you were sort of like a class clown, and clearly you were a comedian before you were officially a comedian. But what did you want to be when you grew up then? Like, did you want to go into entertainment? And branching off from that, did you have a concept of thinking like, I want to be rich someday? And I asked that because Bitcoin, obviously form of money, but number two, the way I grew up outside Chicago was, I was always worried that like my family was really financially insecure. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless if I don't, get a good education and get a good job. And I just have to work really hard. And I want to be able to provide for my family someday. So what did you want to be? And what was your concept, I guess, of money?
Yeah, what I wanted to be was always like some kind of pro athlete. Like I when I was growing up, Bo Jackson was a supreme athlete. So if listeners are too young to know who the hell's Bo Jackson, he was the first person, to my knowledge, to play both professional baseball and professional football at the same time. And as a kid, I'd look at that and be like, dude, I want to do 3 professional sports. But that's back when I thought I could be a pro athlete. I was wrong. But that's the only kind of thing that excited me as a kid. I never thought about being an entertainer. And quite honestly, as a kid, I didn't know really what comedians were. I knew like there were some actors that like, cool, that's a funny movie, but I didn't know stand-up comedy was a thing. And internet comedy was certainly not a thing, because there was not an internet. There was no YouTube or anything. But, when I was like in high school and realizing like, well, I'm not a pro athlete, that much I do know. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to be. And I went to college I enrolled for a year, but I went to college for 3 months and realized that's not for me. And that was a scary time. Because I knew what was not for me. College, like this traditional route, but I didn't know what was for me. So I felt quite scared of like, what am I going to do in life? And my concept of money was basically save money. That's the advice I got from my parents. And at the time it was good advice. Now we realize saving money, US currency, you're holding an ice cube that's melting. Like you're losing value by being a good boy, having your money stick in your bank account. And I think how I thought of money, there's a couple things that come up with that. When I was, about 7, maybe 8 years old, my parents went through a separation, ended up staying together. It's great. They're still together to this day, but marriage issues. They went through a separation, and for a little while, it looked like they were going to get divorced. And the scariest part of that for me, at least consciously, wasn't having my parents apart. It was hearing my mom and dad say like, well, if we get divorced, we're going to have to sell the house. We're going to have to move. And that was so unnerving to me, so destabilizing. And now I can understand, like, oh, like safety, security, your self-preservation, like, of course it's destabilizing and scary. And it was. So I associated like not having enough money equals this horrible feeling. So as a young kid, I certainly linked money is important. I want to feel stable, and money is a way to do that. And then when this is just fun, but I think it was 19 when I ordered my first Tony Robbins cassette tapes. Cassette tapes, by the way. So I'm 40, and now I'm grateful to call Tony Robbins a friend. It's just amazing how
Wow.
that happens. But I'm 19 listening to cassette tapes and then getting into other self-help, self-growth people, Think and Grow Rich, Bob Proctor's work. So I'm starting to realize my mindset is very influential over what happens to me. And I think I've only shared this with my wife, but when I was now at this point, probably 21, 22, I would go to the bank and get a whole stack of deposit slips. And I would practice writing out deposits for, in my mind, this is a monthly deposit for $20,000. And I would fill the whole thing out, and I would just do slip after slip after slip. And it took forever before I earned $20,000 a month, but
wow.
And I'm grateful that I earn well beyond that now. And I don't know, like, did that help me? Did that shape my mind to allow this? Did it help influence my behavior to allow this to happen? I don't know, but that's something I did, which felt, pretty monumental to me with regard to my outlook to money and how I relate to money.
That's such a great story. I don't know if you heard about the actor Jim Carrey doing something very similar. He wrote himself a check for a movie for like $1 million. And really soon after that, he booked Ace Ventura. So I truly believe in like manifesting, and, what you put out, you sort of get back. And I think a positive mentality and a motivation driven mentality really does manifest into reality.
Yeah. And that I think your key word there is so important: motivation, mentality. So I think the mindset's super important, but you have to have action.
Yeah.
You sometimes I've gone through phases, especially in my, younger adult years, where I would rely just on the mindset because it's safer. All the fears, all the discomfort that's provoked when you're taking action. But having that beautiful unlimited mindset with the motivation to take action I do think that's a powerful coupling. But then, of course, just I'm an action taker, but without the North Star of your mindset calibrated to where you want to go, that's a problem too.
Yeah. Well, before we get into how you sort of began to shape your coaching career, just out of curiosity, when you were growing up, did your family talk about politics, or is the political aspect of your comedy and of your work, did that come later because of sort of the division and polarization that has really developed in our country over the last maybe 10 years?
Yeah, it's come recently. I never remember my family talking about politics, and I don't, yeah, actually I do know my parents, or at least my dad, voted for Trump, but like we don't really talk about politics. So that wasn't really influencing me up until 2 years ago. If you said, JP, what's the difference between Democrat and Republican? So, well, I don't know. Like I don't know. I think Republicans drill oil and Democrats don't want to, like, maybe. So, but I was so uninterested at all. Sorry, my dog's saying hi. Politics always seemed like just a waste. Like that's not where actual change happens. Then our freedom started getting taken away, or at least I started to become aware of it. 2 years ago, with restrictions and even the first 2 weeks to slow the spread, back when I bought into the whole narrative for 2 weeks and thinking like, this is a deadly virus. It's going to kill like percentages of the population. Even believing that, I was having conversations with friends like, okay, based on the Constitution, our rights, freedom, are lockdowns even like, should that even be a thing? So we're really questioning it there. But then starting to realize like, all right, the narrative and reality, there's a football field between them. Freedom's not only being taken away, but more and more and more want to be taken away. That's when I realized freedom is my number one value. Fish doesn't know it's swimming in water until you take a little of the water away. So that woke me up. And I do believe freedom is our God-given state. I believe freedom is what makes life a beautiful gift. That's why all people, if they're deprived of freedom long enough, they're eventually willing to die in the name of freedom, because you're not living if you don't have freedom. So then in the political realm, here's what shocked me. Freedom became a political issue. It became like, okay, conservatives support freedom and the left doesn't. And I'm just talking in general terms, but just generally speaking, that's how it was. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. This is America. I thought the Democrats and the Republicans were both supposed to be for freedom. So I'm for freedom, and I need to speak up for freedom, and I need to use my voice to call out the corruption that's trying to take our freedom, because that's part of the way of preserving freedom. You can't get out of a jail you don't know you're in. So part of what I do, I call out corruption so we can see it, so we can step out of it. Mm-hmm. And okay, freedom's in the political arena. That's where I'm going. Never thought I'd be in the political arena, but that's where it went. So nor did I ever think freedom would be something that I needed to stand for, represent. Man, I, like so many others, I was in a weakened state of mind, just taking freedom for granted. Like, come on, this is America. Look at the Constitution's there. Like, who cares? Like, it's just there. Not realizing that without fiercely standing for freedom, it can be taken away. Because you look at history, there's been free people and their freedom's been taken away. So having the humbleness to realize the past repeats itself unless you unapologetically stand for what you want, that really woke me up into action and using my voice, my platform, my comedy to help awaken people to freedom.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you brought up so many interesting points that I want to come back to. And I certainly agree with you that I can't believe in America, we do live in a time where freedom, the idea of that is politicized. And there's one side that seems to be for it, another side that seems to be against it. Before we kind of come back to that, I just want to ask you, I read that you sort of took like a holistic culture education courses, I think at a place called Journeys of Wisdom. And then you moved to San Diego, you started to become a professional life coach. And it's funny because I'm a fan of, people like Tony Robbins, but I always wonder, like, how do people become that? How do you become a job as a personal life coach? And it seems like every other female Instagram account that I see is like a life coach in some way of my peer group. So tell me a little bit about your career journey within personal life coaching.
Yeah, well, it doesn't take much to be a life coach. It's an unregulated industry. So you can just say, I'm a life coach now.
Yeah.
That's part of the beauty, but part of the tragedy of it. There's no standards. So you can have tremendous life coaches, and then you can have someone who's trying to get their life together and they're a life coach. So I started off, I mentioned a few minutes ago that I dropped out of college after 3 months. So there I am, I'm 18, not knowing what the hell I want to do. I just know what's not for me. But within a few months, there's a personal trainer at the gym in Bowling Green, Ohio. She said, "Hey, I've been taking these uh, um, exercise education classes from this guy named Paul Chek. He runs the Chek Institute. It's holistic health, it's performance exercise, it's rehabilitation exercise. And always being an athlete, and I've been working out since I'm 11, I thought, well, I've never heard of anything in the exercise realm that intrigued me enough to want to pursue it as a profession. But hearing her talk about the body, these intricacies, and how everything affects everything else, I thought, well, that's interesting. So I ordered a correspondence course from the Chek Institute, VHS tapes, again, just to date myself. And that was the first time that I became passionate about learning anything. I consumed these courses. I loved it. I started taking the Chek Institute's in-person classes. So now, think of me as a health exercise coach. And then you mentioned Journeys of Wisdom. I got connected to them because with a holistic exercise coach training, I was realizing like, wow, our mind and our emotions can affect not only our body, our well-being, but they can literally cause pain in the body. That intrigued me. So stress reduction, started learning the importance of it. So I started studying with this organization called Journeys of Wisdom to learn more about working with emotions like I needed it, but also as a coach, I wanted to start integrating it with the people I was working with. So that became a beautiful journey. And after a while, I started realizing I'm not super passionate, after a few years, not super passionate about the exercise stuff anymore, but like the emotional stuff, like, ooh, that's really intriguing for me. So I'm working with people more and more in that realm under the life coaching umbrella, all having no idea that I'm also a comedian. I think it was like 13 years or so into, it was 13 years into the exercise coaching and life coaching trail. That's when I started having these ideas of conveying concepts, like life concepts, through the language of comedy. Oh, wow. But I tried to constipate those ideas in myself, telling myself, no, it would be a bad idea for business to let my sense of humor out. Cause I'm a younger guy at the time. And so you try to act more mature and therefore constipate my natural sense of humor. But just kind of like if a woman's going into labor, like the baby's coming, you can fight it, but it's a force of nature. And the ideas I didn't realize, but I was giving birth to a force of nature. And I was 33. And what was I 33? Yeah, I was 33 when I put my first comedy video out at the time it was called How to Be Ultra Spiritual. And it was me portraying how our egotistical nature it comes out, in our spiritual life, our self-growth life, just behind noble looking hiding spots. So I was just pointing that out. But that video woke something up inside of me, a creative satisfaction I hadn't known, and no idea it was going to lead to, all the cool things I get to do today. But just knowing like, wow, making that video felt really good. I want to do another video, which led to me doing another video.
Wow, that's so interesting. But you were on YouTube kind of early, right? Like a couple years prior to making the satirical videos, you were doing your health and holistic kind of coaching videos online, right? Did you see the potential of the growth of something like YouTube to become essentially a career? Like you can monetize it and basically build out a whole platform? Or at the time, was it just something you wanted to do because you wanted to reach a wider audience?
Well, yeah, I saw YouTube as a career for other people. I don't think I believed in myself enough to think it could be a career for me. But yeah, you're right. You've done your homework, Natalie. I was on YouTube for maybe a couple of years before I did any comedy YouTube. And I was, here's some life advice videos. because for 7 years, I ended up teaching for the Czech Institute after I, had years of experience doing my coaching, and there came a point in time where I'm like, all right, like, I think I'm done teaching for the Czech Institute. But here's the problem with that. I was getting a lot of my one-on-one clients from the classes I was teaching for the Czech Institute. So I thought, all right, like that source of clients, like I'm time for me to move on from that teaching role, but I need to find a new way to get clients. Let me make some YouTube videos and maybe people find me from that. I was doing most of my coaching over the phone or Skype. So they can be anywhere in the world. I'll put videos out. It'll be where a way people can find me. And, at the time, like if a video got triple digit views, it's like awesome. Like that video got over 100 views.
Yeah.
So it was like I wasn't big on YouTube by any stretch with the life coaching stuff. But yeah, and that's what YouTube started out for me as, basically a client funnel. And I can't even remember if I got a single client from my life coaching YouTube videos. Probably not. But it was an important piece of the breadcrumb trail that tricked me into going where I was meant to go. I think I have a life philosophy. It certainly applies to me. Other people can be the judge if it applies to them. But I think we have our idea of where we want to go. And in best case scenarios, where we want to go will trick us into going where we're meant to go, which is always a bigger, grander, more meaningful, deeper place than where our ego wants us to go.
Let me ask you something, because personal life coaches, like you kind of poked fun at the fact that people are figuring out their own lives while they're coaching other people on theirs. Well, what about you?
By the way, I did also as a life coach.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Like, do you feel like you were someone who you were confident in the fact that you had a strong sense of self, a strong character, that you could help people on their journeys? Were you genuinely happy, or were you struggling with these things as well, but you could offer sort of that, that outside perspective for others?
So in my early 20s, I look back and I cringe, like, oh, like I had no business like working with people at that level. But I'm so glad I did. I'm so grateful. I mean, those people, hopefully they got some level of value from me, but they contributed to me growing personally and professionally. But, after those first few cringeworthy years, when I look back, and then, I had more stability under my belt, more sense of self. I think what I valued most about my mindset and reality as a coach is I had humbleness to know I don't have everything figured out, and I'm not going to come across pretending like I have everything figured out. And my agreement with myself is, as long as I'm working on bettering myself, I'm doing my own self work, I'm working with a coach for me, as long as I'm working on my personal evolution, then I have a right to work with other people in their life, not to tell them their answers, but to help them find what they know their answers are deep down inside, and for them to find their own guidance, and for them to connect their own inner pieces together that might be fragmented.
So when did you go from a couple hundred views to essentially growing to become a major YouTube personality? Because I find this industry to be fascinating in the sense that I studied very traditional media. I wanted to become, a journalist, a host. I went down the very old school path. And I wish that I had had a fortune teller tell me like, hey, by the way, there's going to be this platform that comes out, YouTube, you should get on that instead of going to these like dinky small news markets, because you can probably monetize and create a bigger career that way. And I had no clue. So how did you grow in that sense?
Yeah, which I'd love to see, in an alternate reality, Natalie, I'd love to see you on CNN, just like you're the one feeding people propaganda, having no idea like what you're actually manipulating people into doing. I would love to see you make that of yourself, Natalie.
I did work at CNN, by the way, behind the scenes. That was my first job out of grad school, was working behind the scenes at CNN.
You have a lot of apologizing to do. So how I grew into whatever it is I am on YouTube now, persistence. Just persistence is the number one key, and as well. And I think there's probably another couple principles and probably a lot of grace and luck. Persistence, being true to myself, and being committed to bettering my craft. And I think that being true to myself, it's probably tied there with persistence. It's probably actually more important than persistence, but the being true to myself, how I've seen that evolve and work so masterfully with amplifying my growth on YouTube. I started off, I'm a life coach on YouTube, but then in the name of being more true to myself, I stumbled my way into letting my sense of humor out on YouTube. Before that, I wasn't letting it out. It was there. Mm-hmm. I've always had a strong sense of humor. That's true to me, but I wasn't being true to myself. So once I started doing comedy on YouTube, I'm more true to myself, and I'm growing more and more and more on YouTube. And my comedy was always, so it was true to me in the sense of, here's my sense of humor, but then my comedy was always true for me and my point of view as well. Like, yeah, I think it's hilarious when people are pretentious about being gluten intolerant. So let me portray that in a video. And I'm gluten intolerant, so I know what I'm talking about there. So putting that in a video and sharing my perspectives of the shadow side of the spiritual world. So that kind of spiritual and health conscious comedy, that's what I was doing for the first few years. That was true to me in my life and my interests. And then, and I was growing pretty well. I was, making a living doing it. And then 2 years ago, as we mentioned, that's when I got into politics, because I really got into freedom is what I got into. But that was another huge step of me becoming more true to myself. And, I think each time we're going to become more true to ourselves, kind of like marry ourselves unapologetically at a deeper level and let our words and actions be even more aligned with our truth. It always comes with fear. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why most people aren't true to themselves. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But I think what prevents it from happening more is we have to go through fear. So my fear 2 years ago was, shit, like, okay, if I'm going into this political realm to go after supporting freedom, it's trendy right now to be anti-freedom. And of course, it's justified with all the virtue signals. But 2 years ago, I'm like, damn, I might lose a lot of my audience, but I got to do it. Got to be true to myself. Paradoxically, becoming true to myself at this deeper level, aligned with the mission of freedom, that turns out to be the best thing I've ever done for growing my audience. So I'm grateful to say, like, I had a pretty big audience before I stepped into the freedom political arena. And at that, even once I did, my audience has grown exponentially. And I track that to the principle of being true to myself. And then, of course, complemented with the principle of persistence. And then also with the principle of consciously working on getting better at my craft.
That is so interesting. I actually wanted to ask you about that, because since we are so divided into sort of these teams of red versus blue, I almost wondered when someone does very, very distinctly go down one path, do they lose 50% of their audience? Or do you need to kind of polarize? Do you need to be a polarizing figure that picks a team in order to shoot up and be a really popular personality? So you saw essentially a major difference when you decided to be authentic to yourself and advocate for freedom, which tipped the scale toward one side of the political spectrum.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily think a person needs to be polarizing. If their truth is polarizing, then yeah, that's what they need to be. But I think coming out as like a mentally manipulative strategy of like, well, man, let me become polarizing so I'm relevant. that might be like not true, might be not true to yourself. So I don't think that needs to happen. I think what needs to happen is someone figures out their truth and align unapologetically with that, whether that's polarizing now or not. By the way, like 4 years ago, it was not polarizing to be aligned with freedom. It's like, oh, it's cool. Freedom. That's boring. Take that for granted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think being true to ourselves, it's always a never ending journey. You know, it's not a destination, it's a journey. So what's true for us in one moment might not be true for us a year from now, or it might be true for us, but that's not where our mission is.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about how things shifted about 2 years ago, because also I think 2 years ago, there was a giant spotlight placed on the value proposition for Bitcoin. And I do want to talk to you about Bitcoin. Really curious, when and how did you first become exposed and get into it? And obviously you're passionate about freedom, and Bitcoin is a tool for freedom. It's freedom money. So talk to me a little bit about your conviction for Bitcoin.
I've been an idiot about Bitcoin for most of my life, Natalie. I'm ashamed to say, but I'll admit I was so anti-Bitcoin for so long. Like, this is stupid. It's just a pyramid scheme. It doesn't have any value other than the fact that everybody else thinks it's valuable. So it's empty. And I even had dinner with a friend last night. We were just talking, conversation from the past came up, and he said, yeah, do you remember when I was back in 2017, JP, telling you should get into Bitcoin? I said, yeah, I should have listened to you, but I didn't. It wasn't until, early last year that my eyes opened about Bitcoin. And it was Tony Robbins sent me a text. He had done a private video for his inner group, in a private video interview between him and Michael Saylor. I didn't know who Michael Saylor was at the time. Obviously, everybody listening to this does. And I watched it. I don't know what it was, maybe a couple hour interview. And there's a reason Michael Saylor is so well respected. He explains things in ways that are just masterful, which comes from his masterful understanding of Bitcoin. So my eyes opened hearing Michael Saylor talk about Bitcoin. And like, I never understood it before, but when I learned to think of Bitcoin as a store of value, any currency is just a store of value. Where do you want to store your value? And I thought, well, right, my parents always said, put your money in the bank, store it there, which implies you're storing your value in US currency, and then you're storing that store of value in the bank. Okay. And now 40% of US dollars ever in circulation have been printed in the last year. So we're holding our value in an ice cube that's melting. We're losing value storing it there. But then learning about Bitcoin, there's a cap. They don't just print more of it, which devalues the rest, and it's trackable. The blockchain, it's so secure. It's basically an ecosystem of truth. You can't steal it. You can't corrupt it. You can't print more of it. When you store your value there, it's not going anywhere. Well, it kind of goes up. That opened my eyes, but that was understanding Bitcoin as the asset. It wasn't until I met the founder of Zion, Justin Rezvani, that I started to understand Bitcoin, the network. Like, Bitcoin, it's not just about the asset, the kind of the money, if you will, the technology of Bitcoin. That's the digital infrastructure of freedom and sovereignty. That excited me even more than starting to invest my value into Bitcoin, because I see major problems in the world. The erosion of freedoms, censorship, centralized companies getting in the way of information exchange, money exchange, and also seeing like, hey, a problem like that isn't accidentally going to get better. It'll only get worse if it's left unattended. So I got even more excited learning about Bitcoin, the network, and how that can be used to facilitate freedom in people's lives.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you about Zion and this idea of creating censorship resistant social networks that are also empowered by Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. But I just have to go on one quick tangent because, Tony Robbins, texts from Tony Robbins. How did you go from, listening to his cassettes to becoming friends with Tony Robbins?
Yeah, the grace of God is probably the real answer, but here's my human answer. I think it was 2016. One of his people reached out to me and said, like, hey, Tony likes your work. I'm like, what the hell? Tony watches my videos? At the time, like the spiritual comedy videos. And I'd actually, before that, had other people, friends of mine, text me. They're at a Tony Robbins event, Date with Destiny. And in like intermissions, he's playing one of my videos, How to Be Ultra Spiritual. And I'm like, whoa, they're showing me like screenshots of it. Like, I'm at Tony's event. Here's a video of your video on the screen. And that was awesome. And then when his people reached out to invite me to his event, Unleash the Power Within, and that was in Dallas, June 2016, I went to that and then, got to meet him in person there, but also have my life really altered from the power of his event. It was like, I had so much respect for him, but that was based on books and his audios, which are great. But the in-person experience, I learned like this man is working at the deepest level I can imagine. My life, my career shifted from that event. And then I was a guest of his at another event of his a couple of years later, and my life is monumentally shifted from that. And then, yeah, just along the way, we're, the friendship has grown, which is just, he's a normal, he's not normal, but he's also a normal guy. They're just the most loving heart. Such a great person, so supportive. So yeah, long story short,
Wow,
the grace of God, probably.
yeah, that's so inspiring. Yeah, I'm a fan of his, and I loved his documentary, Not My Guru or something. I forgot the
I
name
am
of
not
it.
your guru.
So good. So good. Okay. Well, I know that Tony's also an investor in Zion. So let's talk about that for a little bit and just the importance of building these social networks that aren't controlled by oligarchs, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about what Zion is. And, maybe you could share some anecdotes. Have you been censored because of your content?
Yeah, I've been censored because of my content. And then, but more impactful than that is my self-censorship in order to try to stay on the big tech platforms. And someone could say, like, why do you want to stay on the big tech platforms? Well, that's how I've been able to reach millions of people and hopefully have a positive impact and hopefully awaken them to meaningful things. So because I'm all about people, that's why I want to stay on those platforms. But I realize that's not where I want to live. That's not what I want to depend on. That's not where I want to get my nourishment from, basically. So, but what scares me more than my self-censorship and being censored by them, having some videos taken down, the threats of being deplatformed, what scares me way more than that is the masses being censored. Like, who cares? Like, one person wipe out what I have to say. No, they're wiping out what a lot of people have to say. And they're shaping the narratives that, the Biden administration has said, we're instructing Facebook on what to censor. Well, that, even if you agree with the Biden administration, that's very scary because they're shaping people's perspectives. I respect people more than that. I think our beautiful, critical thinking minds and our hearts and our instincts should shape our perspectives without outside influence. I think outsourcing our thinking, sorry, Wally's doing his barking again. I think outsourcing our thinking is very dangerous. And when someone else is trying to get us to outsource our thinking and inject what they want us to think, that's very dangerous. Whether you agree with them or not, it's a violation. And it's all our fault. Nobody's ever had a gun put to their head and said, get on Facebook and be on there now. Get on Instagram, be on there. No, we've all volunteered for it. And it's our fault because we've subscribed to the system. We've supported a system that governs us, censors us, tells us what's true. You know, the 1984 is coming true because it's our fault. But here's the beautiful thing about realizing it's our fault. It means we have had the power all along. We've done this to ourselves. So if we've had the power to dig ourselves into this hole, means we have the power to dig ourselves out of the hole. We know what the old paradigm is. It's taken us a couple of decades to figure it out, learn what it is, all the good, the bad. And there's been tremendous blessings for sure. And there's been some downsides we've learned about. Cool. Now we know. Do we want to stay in the digital dictatorship? If so, cool. Thank you for choosing. And a lot of us are saying, no, I don't want to stay in the digital dictatorship. That's the old paradigm. What I want is a new paradigm, a digital democracy built on freedom, not control, that mirrors human nature rather than restricting human nature. So that's why I've put my energy behind Zion, because it's the social network that I've wanted for myself. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technical minded person, so I haven't known how to build it. But this whole grace of God thing is pretty interesting. I connect with Justin Rezvani, like he was just inspired to move to Austin, didn't know why. Meet a bunch of people. I know people that know people who, that connected us. It's like, wow, you're building the thing I've wanted for me. You're building the thing that solves the problem that I'm most concerned about. Tell me more, Justin. So just getting to know Justin and talking and figuring out like we can align. I've got a lot of people that listen to me, and I like to positively influence people. And I believe what Zion offers, the digital infrastructure of freedom and sovereignty, I believe that's a positive influence. And if people want that, I want them to be aware of it so they know it's a choice. So it's been a pleasure to be able to align with Zion to help bring it to the world.
Yeah, no, big shout out to Justin. He's a friend of mine, and we're both on the Zion platform. But for people that aren't familiar with it, can you share a little bit more about just what it is, and maybe a little bit about how difficult it is to kind of help migrate people off of the big platforms where everybody is, right? Because everyone would want to start the new Twitter or new, competitor, but it's not easy when one has all of the market share and the network effect.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And hi, Wilder, my little boy. I'll be with you in just a few minutes, Wilder. He's the sweetest boy. Yeah, so with Zion, it's the world's first social network built on Bitcoin. And so it's decentralized, it's encrypted, it's censorship resistant. And here's the cool thing, what that means. Censorship resistant, it sounds like, well, that means Zion doesn't censor people like Rumble, Getter. They don't censor, which is awesome, but they're not Rumbles, Getters. They're not censorship resistant. It's still a centralized company. They could censor you if they wanted. They're pledging not to, which is great. By the way, I love those companies. I'm on their platforms. I want them to succeed. I'm fans of their work. But they take a step away from the problem. They don't solve the problem the way I want it solved. So with Zion, because it's decentralized, it uses Bitcoin technology, which means everybody basically has their own decentralized identity hub, runs on nodes, cool, mumbo jumbo technical stuff. But what that means is it's just like human nature. You and I are talking now, Natalie. Nobody can censor this conversation. That is appropriate human nature. The technology that Zion is built on doesn't allow Zion to censor. like say Justin drank some evil Kool-Aid. He's like, hey, as the founder of Zion, or hey, I've got these new investors saying, like, it could hurt our bottom line if people are allowed to talk about Donald Trump, or they're allowed to talk about alternative views on health and what to do. Let's censor them because our bottom line would be improved. You couldn't do it, even if you wanted to. That's what excites me most about Zion, because it gives people a social networking experience that's built on the infrastructure of human nature. It uses digital architecture to mirror human nature. Whereas the old paradigm platforms, we've realized like, oh, they were revolutionary at the time. Grateful they came along, but we've realized they're constructed in a way that's not human nature. It's not human nature for my words to go to a centralized third party, get their approval. And if they approve, they go to you. Or if I want to send you a payment, it goes to them, then to you, and fees are taken along the way like a mafia. I hand something from my hand to you, or words from my mouth to your ears. And you might not like everything I have to say, and human nature has it, you walk away. Yeah. I'm leaving your Zion community, JP, or Natalie, I don't like what you said. I'm leaving your community. Awesome. It's freedom, which means you can do that. So yeah, the challenges of migrating platforms. Give me your wilder. Come say hi to Natalie.
Aww. So adorable.
The challenges of migrating platforms, as I see it, there's addiction to several things. Give me 1 second.
No worries.
I'm this little boy running around. Wilder. I'll play with you in just a few minutes. I love my Wilders so much.
So cute. Love it.
But by the way, like, he's my fuel. He's why I do what I do, the future generations. But we can look at the old paradigm, what I call the digital dictatorship, because that's what it is. We'd say, wow, that doesn't serve us. Why am I so addicted to it? Why do I want what doesn't serve me so well? And I think there's a few pieces to the addiction that can make it tempting to stay monogamous with something that doesn't work for us. It's like, all right, if you're destroying your life with alcohol, why do you keep destroying your life with alcohol? Well, there's an addictive component. We have good reasons for doing dumb things. So some of the reasons why we're addicted, of course, there's manipulative algorithms that hook us. Yeah. They play on our emotions, our neurotransmitters, and they get us addicted to being on their platforms. This all became apparent when the Social Network documentary came out. And then there's also addiction to significance. Tony Robbins talks about we have 6 basic human needs, and one of the needs is the need to feel significant. How do you get your need for significance met is the question, but it's on social media, it's very easy. Old paradigm social media, it's very easy to get your significance need met. Like, whoa, I got a lot of views there. Or like, dude, I left a nasty comment, then I got like 19 comments back. So a lot of comments back to me, even if they're like angry, makes me feel significant because I'm being paid attention to. And then there's also, we have the need for human belonging. Everybody's on Facebook, so I need to be there. Like, what would happen to me if I wasn't like in the know of everything happening on Facebook? So we have these fears come up, but of course we can ask ourselves, do I want to serve my fears, or do I want to choose what I want? So it's so intimidating, like for a creator, it's so intimidating to start a new platform, whether it's like one of the old big tech I remember when Instagram came out, and like censorship wasn't a problem in my mind then, but I'm like, damn, Instagram, like I'm already on Facebook and YouTube. Starting MySpace. MySpace. Starting a third platform? What a pain in the butt. Start with 0 followers? that makes me feel insignificant. And it feels like, oh, I'm just starting the first step of Mount Everest. And of course, that reality is there if you're starting something new on Zion. But of course, it's, starting anything meaningful means we're starting from nothing in the beginning. So, on YouTube, I started from nothing. And I have to keep in mind the pain of, we know what we're going to get on, if we stay monogamous with big tech social media, and then knowing what I want, not what I don't want, but knowing what I want. I want freedom. I want sovereignty. And I want a future where I don't have to explain to my child what freedom was. And we know that we need the digital reality of everything we want in the three-dimensional reality. So I want the social media experience to mirror that reality. I don't want to have to tell my child what freedom was. And that's what makes me motivated to like, cool. That's why I'm starting my community on Zion. That's why I'm starting from scratch. And it's not just starting another social network that comes out. It's starting, it's a social network, but it's different because it's built on the digital infrastructure of freedom and sovereignty. So that's what I keep in mind. Because otherwise, of course, it's natural for there to be a barrier to entry anytime a creator's starting a new platform from scratch.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about what Zion is doing. I hope everyone checks it out. And, you mentioned some of the great features of it, but also just the idea of ownership, that you actually own what you create, which is an issue with content creators. And also, some of the conversations that I think Justin has had with even Michael Saylor about the idea of being responsible for your content in the form of you can't scam, because otherwise they're going to be able to charge you somehow on Lightning Network. And I just think that's so important too, because I'm sure there are impersonators of you that are trying to, scam people, and there's no consequence for it. And it's very difficult to track that down. As we start to wrap up, I'm just kind of curious, back to Bitcoin. One of my fears is that Bitcoin will also be politicized and completely divide people, when I think this is one of the great things that could actually save our country, save us from the debt spiral we're in, maybe perhaps even unite us, if that's even possible. Can you talk about, what do you think about the politicization of Bitcoin? Do you think Bitcoin is political? Do you think it's apolitical? And how can we make it so that everyone sort of agrees that we need a form of money that is based on freedom and decentralization?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is beyond political, just like I think freedom is beyond political. But when someone is corrupt and wants to manipulate others, they'll politicize something, even if that something is beyond politics. If someone's coming from an honest place, they won't. But if they're coming from a dishonest place, and there's dishonest people on both sides, certainly, and honest people on both sides. But so I would anticipate Bitcoin will become politicized. And, you look at the narrative has zero correlation to truth. And you look at there's been a narrative for a couple of years of the dangers of free speech. We saw the New York Times publish an article on the dangers of free speech. And you talk about, it's just for the narrative believers, whichever side of this political spectrum they're on, they've been fed a narrative and they've ingested a narrative about the dangers of free speech. I would be shocked if whoever writes the narrative doesn't bring the politicalization of Bitcoin into the narrative to negatively influence how people see Bitcoin. Because there's a reality of Bitcoin, and then there's how people see Bitcoin. Those who think for themselves will continue to see what Bitcoin is. For those who don't think for themselves, they'll see what Bitcoin isn't, and they'll see how someone else wants them to see Bitcoin, because that someone else has their own agenda. And we've seen a little bit of the Biden administration, are they going to regulate Bitcoin? And I don't like that. Bitcoin's already regulated the way Satoshi wrote it. It's perfectly regulated. It's based on truth. It's not regulated with anything else. So with that said, if we pretend this is a prophecy, Natalie, and Bitcoin will get politicized with a narrative that is not based on truth in order to serve someone else's agenda, Bitcoin itself serves the people's agenda, I think. That's why I think it's so important for the Bitcoin community to continue having a voice, speaking our truth and representing the truth of Bitcoin. Otherwise, if all people hear about Bitcoin is the upcoming narrative, that hurts us all. But if we allow people to learn about the truth of Bitcoin so they can then think for themselves based on that truth, then that helps everybody, helps that individual, but it certainly helps the community as well. And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of my missions by being a public speaker and a communicator on Bitcoin and Bitcoin education is that both sides should really be embracing it based on the things that are important to them, the principles that they hold dear. Because on the left, it's like you're banking the unbanked. It's financial inclusion. It's allowing people to accumulate generational wealth, no matter what their background is, and, sort of leveling the playing field. On the right, it's about personal freedom, self-determination, lower, smaller government. So it's sometimes funny to me that there is this political divide, because Bitcoin to me brings it all together with the most important universal themes of humanity. And as my former guest, Jack Mallers said, it enables peak humanity, I think.
That's a great way to say it.
I wanted to ask you, just out of curiosity, since, you do so much work in this space that has to do with freedom of speech and really, shining a light on some of these issues and these freedoms that are being eroded. How do you think we got to this place where words are scary and where we have, trigger situations and safe spaces? Like, how did we get here in the United States?
Because we're weak. And I think what weakened us was we gave away our self-responsibility in the name of someone else's responsibility, meaning we've weakened ourselves to a place of believing someone else should be responsible for how we feel, our livelihood, and our physical wellness. We see it in the medical industry where people will absolutely give away their self-authority to a doctor. But not saying that's wrong. Sometimes it's great. Other times it isn't. So we give away our self-responsibility into someone else's responsibility. And we have the mindset, like when we're upset, you made me upset. It's so disempowering. I made myself upset based on how I heard your words. So we've given away our self-responsibility because I think life got easy enough that we succumb to the temptation of giving away our self-responsibility for all the things. Self-responsibility for how we feel, how we think, our success, our lack of success, whether we're fat, body positivity, like it's what, like cool, like be large, be small, but be self-responsible. So I think that's at a core level, as deep as I can track. Surrendering our self-responsibility is how we've gotten here, because it's made us very weak. I do believe there's been outside influences that have been manipulative to try to get people to surrender their self-responsibility. And I don't like that. It's like a deceiving pickup artist. They're not coming from a place of truth. They're coming from a place of deception. Yet we still have to say it's our fault. We fell for it. And Ram Dass once said, you can't get out of a jail you don't know you're in. Wake up and realize, see it. We've done it. Cool. We fell for it. My fault. Now I can do something about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how our system, which has such broken money, has permeated into different aspects of society. And I think it's broken down people's ability to have a stronger character, to listen to critique, to be able to use their voices. Also, it's eroded faith, it's eroded family values. And so one of the last questions I wanted to ask you is, your strength of your spirituality is so evident, and it's really compelling, and it's something that's very intriguing about you. And I'm sure it's one of the reasons why people follow you. So where does that come from? Can you talk a little bit just about your spirituality and how you developed such a strength of conviction in that?
Yeah, I think, and I won't pretend I'm the strongest, most spiritual person in the world by any stretch. But I think something that's worked well for me is learning to draw distinctions between what I want versus what wants to live through me. Like, what's the soul calling? What's the mission? How's that show up versus what my mind, what my ego wants for me? Being able to progressively learn how to distinguish between the two and then be the servant to what wants to live through me. That's because I trust my instincts now. I trust my heart. I trust the feelings. That's for me incredibly important. Yeah, and I think that's a principle that isn't just for me. I think it's for everybody. If we learn how to recognize what we want, learn how to become aware of that soul calling, and it's subtle. I don't know how to describe how to do it. There's plenty of stuff out there that can help you down that track. But when we can learn how to distinguish the two and then have the courage to abandon what we want in the name of serving our mission that comes from a higher level, we have a much more fulfilling life. We go through a lot more fear, but we have a much more fulfilling life. And I would also, getting a little more practical, because that's a little more abstract, doing stuff that scares us, I think is so important. You know, our strength of character gets super weak when we just seek comfort and we avoid fear. But I do believe the things that come from like a spiritual level, not our ego. I think if we just follow our ego, we'll be pretty comfortable most of the time. The ego is all about comfort zone, but the great things in life come outside of our comfort zone. And I think when we're getting like the soul callings, none of that reinforces our comfort. It always asks us to take out a step outside of our comfort zone. And I'll give a practical way to help strengthen this in a second. But first, I'll share, I took an inventory of all the great blessings in my life. How I earn a living. I'm a stand-up comedian, YouTube comedian. I'm a husband. I'm a father. Like, I look at those great blessings, and there's many more, but I look at those great blessings. Every single one of them came from getting uncomfortable as hell, doing stuff I didn't want to do. And not just for like a minute. I'm talking a lot. Like when I first saw my wife, like, whoa, she is way out of my league. I do not want to go talk to her because I'll be rejected, embarrassed. I don't know how to talk to beautiful women. But I got really uncomfortable in the name of talking to her. I had a fear about doing the thing, but I did the thing anyway. First time going on stage as a comedian, that's not enjoyable. So much fear, so much discomfort. But I did the thing anyway. And we adapt. We just like exercise. You pick up 75 pounds. Whoa, maybe you can only lift it once and it's barely do it. It's so uncomfortable. But then you adapt. You get stronger. And now you're doing 25 reps with it. So our comfort zone expands as we stretch it. So now getting on stage, it's very comfortable for me.
Yeah.
Because I went into the discomfort long enough, consistent enough that my comfort zone expands. And now if we follow the soul calling, we'll be guided to do something else that's uncomfortable. So two practical things. The question is, what can I do that's uncomfortable that also feels meaningful? Because I could say, Natalie, why don't you jump inside of a cage with a tiger? That'd be very uncomfortable, but probably wouldn't feel meaningful to your heart. But, if you're getting like these ideas like, oh, I could start a blog or I could host an event, but that scares me. I've never done that before. You'll probably sense, but it feels meaningful, like a lot of fear around, you feel that, but in the eye of the hurricane, you might sense it feels meaningful too. That's when we want to do the thing that's uncomfortable. Then the second practical thing that I'll offer on that is intentionally creating scenarios that make us really uncomfortable. Quick example of both physically, psychologically, either one, preferably both at times. But for example, I've got a cold plunge tub here at my house. I keep it at 39 degrees and it gives you great physiological benefits, but I don't do it for that. I like it, but I don't do it for that. I start my day in the cold plunge tub because it's spiritual training for me to do the thing that's uncomfortable, for me to say, that's going to be uncomfortable and I'm not going to avoid it. I'm going to take control and I'm going to do it anyway. And other people, they'll like do an open mic on stand-up comedy, which is tremendous self-growth because it's so uncomfortable. Taking an improv class, people doing public speeches, just anything, psychologically, physically, that will be uncomfortable for you, do it and do it regularly. That's, I think, how we become a spiritual warrior who's got the unapologetic resolve to listen for our mission, become aware of it, and have the courage to serve the mission.
I love that advice. I think that's so important. And taking risks, I think, is just critical to us as humans for our growth and development. Where I want to close on is just, what is your mission with your work and how will Bitcoin potentially help with that mission?
Yeah. My mission is to help awaken people to their greatest God-given gift, freedom. Nothing more. Help people awaken to their freedom. Because if we don't know it's there, we're not going to do anything to protect it. And if we don't know it's there, we're not going to enjoy it and savor it and take advantage of the blissful beauty, the expansiveness that comes with freedom. So awaken people to freedom. And how I see Bitcoin supporting that mission is I see Bitcoin as the digital expression of freedom.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on everything. If there's anything else you want to share, feel free. Otherwise, I just really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate you having me. And, next time we get to talk, I hope I have more disruptions from animals and children. Maybe I'll have like a horse interrupt our conversation or an army tank. But it's such a joy to talk with you, Natalie, and can't wait to be hanging in person soon.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of the Coin Stories podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Brunell, and please remember to subscribe to my page and like this video so other people have a chance to see it. Till next time.